Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. I'm your host, Joe Hamilton, alongside my trusty co-host, Scott Tobin. Scott, how you doing, man? Scott, you just cut out there, man. You still there?
Yeah, no, you completely froze on me there, man.
So, how are you doing tonight, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm tired. I went out and called a high school baseball game and a high school soccer game today, plus working. So I'm a little bit tired, but I'm glad to be on here with you, bud.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on here with you. And to be honest with you, I'd rather be doing this and watching what's going on with the St. Louis Cardinals right now, because this is ugly. I mean, this is. I even posted it on Facebook, Scott. I don't know if you saw my post that I put earlier today. I said, this is an unmitigated disaster. And is that the right terminology for it?
It's not good. It's not good. We were talking a little bit before we came on the air. You look at this Cardinal team and you're missing your starting shortstop. You're missing your starting center fielder. You're missing your starting left fielder. And, I know a lot of people complain about Paul DeYoung and Tyler O'Neill and Harrison Bader, but you take those three guys out of that lineup and you're missing 20 home runs, you're missing 44 RBIs, and you're missing Gold Glove caliber defense. Just look at what happened to the Cardinals in the first inning tonight. First batter of the game, Tim Anderson hits a little roller to the shortstop that Sosa boots, lets the first runner get on base. Then Flaherty hits a guy. Then you have a wild pitch. Then you have Tommy Edman stand under a fly ball and just totally miss it, let it hit off the side of his glove and fall on the ground. And then you have Dylan Carlson boot a ball in center field. These guys are not, the Cardinals are going to be ugly for a while because there's no quick fixes, because you've got a shortstop with a broken rib, you've got a center fielder with a broken rib, and a left fielder with a broken finger. So, I mean, it's not going to get any better for a couple of weeks at least.
Yeah, so you're saying that in terms of production, right? You're going to say this team's going to struggle for a while, is what you're saying?
Well, yeah. I mean, look at that lineup. When you saw that lineup come out today, was there anything about that made you feel good? Because here's the problem. You still have Paul Goldschmidt. You still have Nolan Arenado. You still have Yachty. But they're the only three people you really have in this lineup at this point. Dylan Carlson's not really doing much. Tommy Edman's not really doing much. Tommy Edman hasn't done much in a couple of weeks, other than the two games against the Pirates. And I think Dylan Carlson's back is bothering him a little bit. He hasn't hit a whole lot lately. So now you've put all this pressure on your three superstars that you have left, and Arenado, Goldie, and Yachty. And so every time those guys come up to the plate, they're trying to hit a grand slam with nobody on base. In Arenado's case at third base, he's trying to make superstar plays on every play, and so you're seeing him boot some balls that you would never ever see him boot, because he's trying to do too much to make up for the absence of everybody else. So it's just a snowball type thing that happens when you've got this many of your key players down, that it just puts so much pressure on the other guys. And then you look at what you've got in the lineup today. I mean, you have Matt Carpenter, who what has Matt Carpenter done that makes you think that's going to be any better? Max Moroff playing second base. He still doesn't have a hit in the big leagues and looks overmatched every time he comes to the plate. And Lane Thomas looks like he doesn't have a clue in left field. So, Sosa's done okay, but he's not going to give you much. I mean, he's not going to hit any home runs or drive home any runs. He might get on base every once in a while. I mean, so basically you've got four pretty easy outs at the bottom of your lineup.
You got 1 through 5. 1 through 5 is, for the most part, I think those guys are good. You got Edman, who's struggling. You're going to struggle. Carlson, you're going to see him struggle a little bit too, being a young guy. You have Goldie and Arenado. Those guys really haven't gotten going together yet. And it seems like Arenado's been struggling before today too. So it's not like both of them guys are going. Plus, I mean, you have Molina, and then, yeah, I get it. But Goldie and Arenado, get these two guys going. Wouldn't the lineup lengthen out a little bit, even though you're losing all those guys?
No, because, again, you have Goldie and Arenado. So you have nobody behind them. And pitchers aren't going to give them good pitchers to hit because they know that there's nobody behind them, So pitchers are not going to give them pitches to hit. And again, like I said, they start putting pressure on themselves. As you can see, Nolan's 2 for his last 23. Don't think for a second that's not because he's trying to hit a 3-run homer with nobody on base every time he comes up to the plate, because he realizes that he and Goldie have to carry this team right now. And that's what happens when you have these kind of injuries. To have 3 huge pieces go down, it just puts so much more pressure on those other guys, and they try to do too much, and then you see your offense go into a funk, which we're seeing right now.
I want to quickly go into the pitching aspect of this game. You had 2 high school teammates in Lucas Giolito and Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty, like you said, wasn't good in this one, but it's not like his stuff wasn't there, Scott.
I don't know if Jack Flaherty was good in this one because, I'm sure that he felt like he had to strike everybody out, because if the other team hit the ball, he couldn't feel like his defense was going to field it. Like we talked about, the first inning you have 2 errors. The second inning, Carlson doesn't get to a fly ball in shallow center field that it didn't even look like he was running hard for. And then when he did get to it, he kicked it. Then Arenado misses an infield. So I don't know how much blame you can give Jack, because his defense was booting every ball that got hit. So I really don't blame Jack Flaherty for that. And, it's the one bad game that he's had out of 11 starts now, 10 starts?
Yeah. You can't blame Jack Flaherty, obviously. And then Lucas Giolito on the other side. When the White Sox had their bad inning, Scott, or when they had their big inning offensively, I'm like, you know what? The first one, I go, you know what? He was sitting there for a while in Lucas Giolito. And usually when pitchers sit there for a while, they tend to get the screws kind of loosen a little bit. Do you kind of see that like I do, or do you have differing viewpoints on that?
Yeah. I mean, that they were both fired up to try to really outduel each other tonight. And sometimes that leads to pitchers having bad games too, because they're trying to throw a little harder than normal and trying to do stuff. And then, like you said, when you sit on the bench for a while, that can screw things up. And the White Sox defense hasn't played a clean game today either. They've booted a couple of balls, kicked a couple of balls around. So it's not been a pretty game at all in any aspect. And, it's like I told you before, the Cardinals, this is going to be a rough stretch for the Cardinals, because, I don't see any reinforcements coming in the near future that's going to make this team better for the next couple of weeks, honestly. I mean, because there's just not anybody. You don't really have anybody in the minor leagues that you're going to bring up that's going to help at shortstop or center field. So until you can get Paulie and Tyler O'Neill back, and then hopefully Harrison's not out for too terribly long, I mean, it's going to be a struggle.
Now, you say that, Scott. Do you think the Cardinals get desperate enough where they go out and do something, whether it be if there's someone out there that I'm not even thinking of, like free agent wise, or someone that's out there as a maybe you pick them up off just something. They got to do something, because they're awfully thin, and I really don't know if I want to see Justin Williams in this outfield much either. So I think they're pretty desperate. I think they want to go out and do something, but
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I think that's the worst thing they can do right now, honestly. For one thing, I don't know that there's much available right now. I know you're going to say, let's go get Yasiel Puig. No, that's not happening, Joe. So, and other than that, this early in the year, I don't know what is available. And if you are able to pull something off right now, you're going to have to pay an exorbitant price to go get something. So I don't think they're going to do that right now. I think they're going to just try to piece it together and hope that they get some decent pitching. Hope that some of these guys, come through with a key hit here or there, and you can win some games. I mean, as bad as this team is right now, you would think that they can go to Arizona and win a couple of games in that series. The Dodgers are, you look at that series and go, oh man, then they're playing the Dodgers, but the Dodgers are beat up. So while I don't think they're going to have a winning road trip, honestly, just because they're so decimated at this point, I think they can go to Arizona and win a couple. I think they can go to LA and win one, and then you come home and play Cincinnati and Cleveland. So, you just have to, kind of like what we talked about with the Blues when they had all of those injuries, you just got to try to keep your head above water, try to play as close to 500 as you can, because let's face it, nobody in this Central Division while the Cardinals are beat up is going to run away from them. You just got to stay 500-ish until you get those guys back, and then when healthy, I think.
Okay, I mean, I guess I'm a knee-jerk reaction type again. I hate to be that way, but it's like when you get something like this going on this early in the season, it's like I'm like, man, there has to be something that can be done. But also, I think you know what? This is not a good division. This isn't exactly the NFC least of the NFL, but this is not a good division. But on the other hand, Scott, what if these teams do get hot? Let's say Milwaukee gets hot, Chicago gets hot. There's a chance that still happens.
There's a chance that they're going to get hot, yeah. But like I said, they're not better ball clubs than the Cardinals are. So even if they get hot, they're not going to run away from you, because as bad as the Cardinals are playing right now, they're still going to win some games. Are they going to beat the best teams in the league 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4 the next couple of weeks? No. But if they can play around 500, and even if one of those teams gets hot, say the Cubs or the Brewers or the Reds get hot, and they go 2 or 3 games ahead of you during this stretch. When the Cardinals are healthy, are you really going to feel like they can't make a run and get right back into first place? Because look what we saw the Cardinals do for that 25-game stretch when everybody was healthy. That lineup was almost unstoppable when you had Young and O'Neal and Bader in there healthy. And, their defense was playing good. And, they're just better. They're a better team than the Cubs when they're healthy. They're a better team than the Brewers are when they're healthy. They're a better team than the Reds are when they're healthy. I mean, look at the Central Division, Joe. They're 14-6 in the division. They've beaten everybody. Yeah, the Cubs won 2 out of 3. And even then, we're still 14-6 in the division.
Okay, Scott, but you bring that up, and that's a good point. The 3 games against Chicago, both teams, the 3 games that they lost against these Chicago teams, they've been absolutely horrible, hitting in the 170s, and they scored
half of your team.
I get it, Scott, but I'm used to the Cardinals having guys come up and be like diamonds in the rough. How many times have we seen guys come up and tear it up for about a month, and then you forget about being decimated? I guess I'm just totally used to that this is kind of new air, rarefied air for me. Well,
and if you really think about it, they kind of did that. Justin Williams came up and had a 2 or 3 week stretch where he was hitting like crazy. Sosa had a stretch here where for the last couple of weeks where he's on base and he's hitting like crazy. But here's the thing. You don't have just one guy that you need to step up right now. You have 3 guys, 4 guys that you have to try to fill in for. That's a lot harder than having one guy that you're having somebody step up and fill in for. So, we haven't had a stretch like this where you have 3 of your 8 starters down for a month or more at a time. That just doesn't happen usually. So, yeah, I mean, just like I said, Justin Williams was on a tear there for a couple of weeks. He was hitting 300 for a little while, and hitting home runs and driving home runs. Sosa for the last 10 days has hit almost 400. But it doesn't matter when, you've got 3 other guys that can't carry you right now. So, you're just going to have to live with it right now and realize that when this team is healthy, they're a very good ball club. You just got to keep your head above water for right now.
All right, Scott. Dad asked the question I asked you before. My dad asked me this question I asked you before the show, and I want you to tell everybody else what you told me. What is the identity of this Cardinal team right now?
Their identity right now is that they're beat up. It truly is. Because here's the thing. It's not just affecting your offense. It's affecting your defense because you have 3 guys that have been Gold Glove finalists that are missing. So you have guys out of position, like we talked about tonight. You have Dylan Carlson playing center field. He's not a center fielder. We've seen how bad this outfield defense is when you don't have O'Neal and Bader. Tommy Edman, while he's serviceable, doesn't need to be in the outfield. I mean, there's no excuse for the fly ball that he missed tonight.
Right.
So, it's hurting you offensively, it's hurting you defensively, and your pitching's beat up. So the things that are what your identity is, your pitching, your defense, and then your pretty solid offense, when you have all of those injuries, you really don't have an identity because it's taken away from each one of your strengths. and you're just trying to tread water right now.
Just tread water and you'll be fine.
And that's what you have to do. By the way, they're not the only team in baseball that's doing this. Look what's going on with the Mets. I mean, the Mets are more beat up than we are, and they're trying to do the same thing right now.
Yeah, they are. And we'll get to the rest of the league here in a minute. After this break here on Crunch Time, we'll talk some more Major League Baseball. So stick with us right here on ASTV Productions. Welcome back to ASTV Productions here on Crunch Time. And Scott, I saw this story right after we got off air last night, and I can't believe we didn't even think about talking about this. The Oakland Athletics have visited Portland, Oregon, as a part of a fact-finding mission as a part of their relocation process. Scott, tell me, why haven't they begun this process a long time ago, knowing they probably weren't going to get money for a new ballpark?
Oh, don't think they haven't already done it. They're just making it more public right now because they're trying to put pressure on the city of Oakland to get the funding to build the stadium. They're not just now going, hey, let's look around and see. They've been doing this for probably almost a decade. Now they're just making it more public because they're trying to put more and more pressure on the city to get that funding to get a stadium built. That's what this is about right now. But at this point, they've gotten so close to having this stadium built 2 or 3 different times, and then it's fallen apart. So it's going to be really interesting to see. You would hate to see the A's move again, but let's face it, they've kind of been the team in Major League Baseball history that has been all over the place. Because you got to remember, they started out in Philadelphia, and then they were in Kansas City. This is already their 3rd city. So, they've definitely been a franchise that's moved around all over the country in their history.
Is Oakland an attractive market for baseball?
Oakland is when the A's are good, they draw fans. Do they draw as well as they could? Probably not. Part of it because, that stadium is a dump. It was a football stadium originally. It was built for the Raiders. So it's been, they've tried to modernize it and change it and move it around and reconfigure it. So that's an issue that they've always faced. And then the other issue that Oakland has always faced is the fact that the San Francisco is, 8 miles across the bay, and so they've always had to compete with the Giants and the 49ers and whatever other sport that San Francisco has had. And Oakland's kind of like the redheaded stepchild when you talk about those two cities. So, and just look, because, we've seen the Raiders move. The Warriors pretty much play right outside of San Francisco now, even though they're an Oakland-based team. And, even where the A's have talked about building a stadium, it's not really in Oakland. It's closer to San Francisco. So, it's a good sports town in one way. And in another way, they just have a hard time competing because San Francisco is the sexier of the two cities.
Is that why you saw the Golden State Warriors go from Oakland to San Francisco effectively then?
Yeah. They were able to get them to help them build that arena, closer to San Francisco than what they could do in Oakland. And like I said, we've seen this. Look at the odyssey that the Raiders were. They were in Oakland, then they were in LA, and then they were in Oakland, and then they were, and then they ended up going to Vegas now. It was back and forth because they fought with the city for years on funding and help and everything else. And that's the same battle that the A's have been fighting. This isn't a new thing. They've been talking about this since Tony La Russa was in Oakland. That's when they started talking about the fact that the A's needed a new stadium. So you're talking about the mid-'90s that this has been a topic.
Let's hope they get it too, because with a new stadium, Scott, wouldn't you think that would make the A's more money, and in turn, they can go out and get free agents and keep some of their young guys like they never are able to do?
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely help. Anytime you build a new stadium, the revenue that you get is going to make a big difference. And it's not like Oakland has not produced talent. I mean, they've produced tons and tons of talent. They just have not been able to keep it over the last 20 years. But, if they could get that new stadium built, it would be huge for the A's. But would I be shocked if in 3 or 4 years we're talking about the Portland A's or the Nashville Athletics or, who knows, the Montreal Expos? It wouldn't shock me.
It wouldn't shock me at all. So are those the 3 cities that you would want a Major League Baseball team in? I mean, would you maybe go Charlotte? Would you maybe go to the Carolinas? Anywhere else?
I mean, I think those are I think those are probably the first 3. I think there's been a lot of talk and a lot of focus on trying to get a team in Nashville, which makes a lot of sense. The way the Nashville's kind of exploded the last 10 or 15 years as a tourist destination and just grown in population in general. Portland's always been a place that everybody's talked about. A lot of people say, what about Vegas? I don't think there'll be a Major League Baseball team in Vegas just because of the gambling thing. And I know people will say, well, football's done it and hockey's done it. But because of baseball's, the golden rule is players don't gamble on baseball and, the whole Pete Rose thing, I'm just not sure that baseball will ever move to Vegas. So I would think Portland, Nashville, Montreal, Montreal is definitely kind of the hotbed again now too. And then Charlotte would probably be 4th in that list.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because, the Oakland A's, I always like that team when they're successful. And I like them anyway because they're just a scrappy bunch. And let's be honest, I love the Oakland A's fans. I mean, they've taken on a whole new level of their own. Scott, are they the most wacky fan base in all of baseball?
They're probably up there. I mean, Oakland sports fans in general, just think about the Raiders and the Black Hole and those fans during football season in Oakland. Yeah, they're probably up there. As far as wacky, in one aspect, you could probably almost throw Philadelphia fans in there just with their insanity and some of the stuff that happens in Philadelphia. But I would have to say that Oakland is right at the top of that list.
Yeah.
And, we talk about the A's moving, there's another team that could end up moving to one of those cities here in the next couple of years too, and we're still waiting to see.
I'm assuming you're talking about the Tampa Bay Rays there, and that's the team I wanted to go to next because they've been hot. That team, for whatever reason, has been unbelievably hot. We know about their pitching, and their hitting shown up too. I like Yandy Diaz at first base. Randy Arozarena, while we want to see him for a full season, has had a nice year to this point. It sucks that they had to go out and trade Willy Adames. And Scott, maybe you can help me make sense of that trade because when I saw that, I'm like, well, why would you do this? If you're wanting to contend for an AL East title, which I think they can, why would you go out and trade your star shortstop? That makes no sense to me.
That trade didn't make sense to me from either side because while Tampa gave away their shortstop, Milwaukee gave away 2 of their really good young middle relief pitchers that we saw pitch really well in that series against the Cardinals.
Eisen and who else?
Both of their names are going to escape me as we're talking about it, but they're both really talented young middle relief pitchers, and I apologize for not being able to remember either one of their names, but that trade just didn't make sense to me at all, honestly.
I don't quite understand it, but I can make sense of the Tampa Bay Rays winning, and people were like, Joe, how are you going to make sense of that? Well, they're like the Oakland A's in a sense because they can do a lot with a little. Right, Scott? I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of years, it's because they've had dominant pitching. Their lineup has not been great, I mean, they've basically done it with pitching and defense. But yeah, they've done it kind of under the radar, not spending a lot of money, much like Oakland has. You'd be right on with that.
Yeah, I always like those teams because they defy the odds. But Scott, I've asked you this before, and since they're both good, I'm going to ask it again. Can a team like that win the World Series? A team like that that's penny. How can it be done? Because it's never been done where a team that's not spent a lot of money won a World Series. Sorry, I completely lost you there.
They had a huge budget on their teams, so it can be done. But the Rays managerially are win or go home playoff game. Maybe the Rays win that game, and it's a whole new series.
Maybe you're exactly right. So, going toward the MLB scoreboard, I want to start with this one. The Philadelphia Phillies beat the Miami Marlins today in Miami 2-0. The Philadelphia Phillies are now one game under 500, and this is a team, Scott, that I thought would be close to everybody in the division, to where I thought they'd be a good team. Is the jury still out on them, Scott? Do you want me to give them another month till Flag Day?
Yeah, I would, because again, that division, nobody's running away with it. I mean, the Mets are beat up and struggling. The Braves are beat up and struggling. The Phillies still can win that division pretty easily, if they get really hot. The Marlins aren't going to run away with it. I mean, that division's totally up for grabs.
That division is totally up for grabs. I just don't understand how. I mean, the Phillies, to me, the Phillies are kind of like the New York Mets, but a little bit better. I know that's a hard comparison for people to take in. Like, really, you're comparing the Phillies to the Mets? I'm not saying they're exactly like each other, Scott. I'm just saying the situations are really close because they both can't seem to get out of their own way.
Well, again, kind of like I alluded to earlier, when you look at the Mets, they're still right in the middle of it, and look what the Mets are missing. I mean, you've missed Jacob deGrom most of the year, off and on. Noah Syndergaard hasn't been there at all. All three of your starting outfielders are out, as is your fourth outfielder. So you have a totally different outfield than normal. Francisco Lindor's done basically nothing to this point. So, I mean, the Mets are in, like I said earlier, the Mets are in worse shape than the Cardinals are, and yet they're still treading water, and they're right there just a couple of games away from being in first place in that division.
Gives me hope, Scott. It gives me hope. That's for sure. The Baltimore Orioles and Minnesota Twins. Minnesota beats Baltimore. That was yesterday. What am I thinking? The Seattle Mariners and my bad. The Philadelphia Phillies beat the Miami Marlins today. You had the Mets or Reds taking down the Nationals 2-1. You had the New York Mets beating Colorado Rockies 3-1. Saving grace for the Mets, I guess, Scott, is they're playing Colorado.
Yeah, although we saw in that series with Colorado can still score runs. So, I mean, it's tough. But, yeah, that the Mets should be able to win that series.
The Chicago Cubs take down the Pittsburgh Pirates 4-3. Can't talk today for some reason. Don't know why. Powering through it. You have the Toronto Blue Jays taking down the New York Yankees in the Bronx 6-2. This was interesting to me because you had Corey Kluber on the mound. And coming off a no-hitter, you thought you would have seen a little bit more from Kluber. But the Toronto Blue Jays, man, is this a team about to take off?
Again, it's going to come down to their pitching. I mean, their lineup is good. Vladdy Guerrero Jr. is turning into the player that everybody thought he was going to be. He's one of the best hitters in baseball this year. But I just don't have a whole lot of confidence in that Toronto pitching staff to be able to really carry them through any stretch of the season. I think that's going to be I think that's going to be the thing that holds them back, is that they just don't have enough pitching.
The Atlanta Braves take down the Boston Red Sox 3-1. You have the Cleveland Indians taking down the Detroit Tigers 4-1. You have the Kansas City Royals beating the Tampa Bay Rays 2-1, effectively ending their 11-game winning streak. Or 10-game winning streak. So, thing is, you had some streaks going down today. Had some great games going on today. Scott, did you are you going to take anything away from what are you going to I'm sorry, man, I can't talk today. Are you going to take anything away from this division playing today? You take any solace in the Reds winning their game today?
Again, I'm not really going to worry too much yet, especially in the Central Division. I think you keep an eye on the Reds and the Brewers, but I still feel like the Cardinals are going to be okay. Like I said, I think you just tread water for the next couple of weeks, and I'm not worried. I think this team is better than those other teams in this division, and I think they're going to make themselves better as you get closer to the trade deadline, because I do think Mozeliak is going to make some moves as we get closer to this deadline.
You could only hope so, and I think so as well. So when we come back here on Crunch Time, we'll be talking some Stanley Cup playoff action, as well as maybe breaking down what happened with the St. Louis Blues this season, at least a little bit of it. So stick with us right here on Crunch Time.
Hey Crunch Time fans, my name is Graham Forsyth. I'm the host of Coffee with Graham and the Prospect Show on ASTV Productions. On Coffee with Graham, I talk to athletes, coaches, and whoever else involved in the amateur sports scene in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. And on the Prospect Show, I talk to the best young hockey prospects from around North America. You can catch all the coverage on ASTV Productions. You can catch Coffee with Graham on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10:30 a.m. Central Time. And for the Prospect Show, that show airs every Friday at 8 p.m. Central Time. Hope to see you there. Have a good one.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Joe Hamilton alongside Scott Tobin. Before we get to the Stanley Cup playoff action going on, Wayne Gretzky has left Edmonton again. This comes on the heels of the NHL moving to TNT, and there's a chance he goes to TNT as part of their coverage. The Oilers just lost in a sweep to the Winnipeg Jets, a surprising sweep to the Winnipeg Jets. What was your reaction, Scott? I know you saw this today. What was your reaction to this?
It's probably a good move for Gretzky. I mean, I'm sure he's in one way ready to get away from the upper management role with the hockey team. He's tried that with a couple of different teams. It hasn't worked out the greatest for him in the places that he's landed. So I'm sure for him to be able to stay in the game but go to TV and not have to deal with the day-to-day headaches of being an NHL executive, I'm sure it's a move that the great one is looking forward to, honestly.
It comes on the heels of the sweep of the Edmonton Oilers by the Winnipeg Jets, and I'll get to the Jets side in a second. Where do the Edmonton Oilers go from here? Because every year it seems like they get first round pick after first round pick. You got Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, and nothing else. They keep throwing shit at the wall and thinking it's going to stick. It's not going to stick. So where does Edmonton go from here? Do you see a guy like Connor McDavid requesting a trade?
I would say if they're not better in the next year or so, he probably will. If he doesn't see some signs of the organization turning things around. Like you said, you've got to be able to get those early picks and make it work. Get players that can help build your organization in the way to be successful. And it's been a while since Edmonton's been a successful organization, honestly.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What are you saying?
It was a carousel of goal. It's been a carousel of goaltending, Scott. And in my mind, if you're going to be successful in this league, you're going to have to at least produce one franchise goaltender in a lifetime to actually try to win something. It's just been a carousel. I think that's where it all starts, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need to have solid, consistent goaltending. I mean, you can bring that back to the Blues conversation and all the different goalies that they've gone through, since Grant Fuhr, honestly, up until you get to the Bennington the last couple of years. I mean, think of all the goalies that have come through St. Louis trying to find that number one, that guy that's your franchise goalie. So, I mean, it's easy to say that. It's harder to find those guys than you would think. But, yeah, you have to have solid goaltending. If you don't have solid goaltending, you're not going to win. And, again, we'll just look at the Blues for a perfect example of that.
Yeah, and before we get to the Blues, I wanted to stick with the Edmonton-Winnipeg thing. And Winnipeg, does this make them a very scary team going deeper and deeper into the Stanley Cup playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I think they could be a real threat as when they get deeper. It's going to be fun to see them try to make a run, see if they can go far. But I think they're definitely dangerous.
What makes them dangerous, Scott, is not only they have Scheifele, Kyle Connor. These are all young guys. The question for me was going to be their defense without a guy in Justin Byfuglien. And, man, it's worked out like gangbusters for them. And then you have Connor Hellebuyck. Connor Hellebuyck won the Vezina Trophy in 2019-2020. This was a guy who struggled early in the season and then picked it up toward the middle and end of the season, and he's returned to Vezina form. He, unlike Jordan Binnington, at least what I saw, stole that series. He stole that series because you know very good and well that Edmonton had Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid playing 30, 40 minutes a night. And it's hard to stop those guys.
Right.
So Connor Hellebuyck, is he the biggest X factor for them?
He could be. He definitely could be. And if he's able to steal series, I mean, that could be huge.
Yeah, and that could very well be huge. You have Toronto and Montreal playing, and one of those teams is going to play the Winnipeg Jets in the second round. Now, Scott, who has a better shot of dethroning that team? Is it Montreal or is it Toronto?
That's a toss-up. I'm gonna say Montreal, and I'm just throwing it out there because I think I'm 50-50 on which one, but I'm gonna go with Montreal.
Well, and I'm going Toronto just because
you like the Maple Leafs.
Well, not just that. Have you seen what they've gotten out of not Frederik Andersen, Jack Campbell?
Yeah, I know.
Jack Campbell's been a savior for them. Don't know if Freddie Andersen took that in a good way, having to sit behind a guy in Jack Campbell. But you know what? You ride the hot hand, right? And they're doing that. And they're enjoying a series lead at the moment. We'll get to the scoreboard here in a second. Is Carey Price at the point where maybe he can steal you a game or two still in his career?
Yeah, I think he still can. And they've got a pretty good backup up there, too, that if Carey Price doesn't play well, they have a goalie as his backup that we know pretty well here in St. Louis that is also capable at times of stealing a game here or there. So I think they're in pretty good shape with their goalie tandem up there, honestly.
And these playoffs, especially when you had the all-Canadian division, the Scotia North division, you knew this was going to be bloodbath hockey. It was going to be fun hockey to watch, and it really has been. So going to the scoreboard here today, you have the Toronto Maple Leafs taking down the Montreal Canadiens 4-0. That's Maple Leafs lead that series 3-1. Scott, they may end up getting past the first round series, but at the same time, we've seen this song and dance before.
I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna say, don't put the cart before the horse, there, buddy.
You're right, Scott. I mean, we've seen this song and dance before, and I'm starting to believe. But again, it's 3-1, and it's the Toronto Maple Leafs. If anybody else had a had misery for history, it'd be the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it's sad because a lot of people are like, how can you be a Blues fan and a Leafs fan? I guess you love misery. I guess I do. They just look so good, man. And then when it comes to, no pun intended, crunch time, they can't get it done ever. So I'm hoping they get it done here. Now, the Nashville Predators and the Carolina Hurricanes, that game is 2-1 Nashville with about 9 minutes left in the third period. Series tied 2-2 there. How do you see that series panning out? Because it's an all-tied series, Scott. Anything can happen. And I'm kind of liking what I've been seeing out of UC Saros.
Yeah, it's been a good series. It's definitely been a competitive series. I'd like to see Carolina win that one just because I don't like Nashville that much, just because of their history with the Blues. So I'm going to pull for Carolina to pull that series off.
I'm pulling for Carolina too. I can't stand Nashville, but I'm not 100% on that because Carolina, while they did go to the conference final a few years ago, they're not the same team. They don't have the same goaltender. This is a goaltender who's making his Stanley Cup playoff debut, Scott. They're having a rookie goaltender, so I wish him luck, and he's played well. So hopefully,
sometimes rookie goalies can win Stanley Cups, Joe.
Jordan Binnington, I get it. We'll get to the Blues here in a second, man. I know you want to go there because I know you want to get on your soapbox for this one, especially what I'm about to ask you. But all right, Scott, do you see that being a 7-game series?
I think it very well could be. It's been a really even series to this point, so I would not be surprised at all if it's a 7-game series.
Man, I hope it is because since the Blues are out, I want to see as much hockey as possible. Speaking of the St. Louis Blues, losing 4 straight to the Colorado Avalanche is not how I would want to end the season. But knowing what we knew right before the playoffs started with David Perron, kind of saw something like that happening because you're losing a point-per-game player. But first of all, Scott, let's just go through the season. You had a lot of injuries. Scott, this team fully healthy. If this team were fully healthy, would this have been a cup contender? Yes or no?
Man, that is a tough question to answer. I'm not sure they would have been. I'm not sure this team was ever completely all on the same page and everybody pulling in the same direction. I know I sound like Craig Berube saying that, but I'm not sure they were focused and everybody was all in. I just don't think this team was. I'm not sure that even if they're completely healthy, I'm not sure that this team goes very far. Just because I think there was a little divide in some of the philosophy among the players.
And Graham Forsythe chimes in. He goes, "The Blues ran into a juggernaut." At this point, Scott, who's a better team? The Avalanche or the Golden Knights?
I think right now you'd have to say Colorado the way they're playing. That front line of Colorado is pretty freaking scary. You saw what they did to the Blues. I think Colorado might be the better team, although if it ends up being Colorado and Vegas in that series, that will be a heck of a matchup.
That will be a heck of a matchup. But going back to the Blues, Jordan Binnington, okay? He didn't have a great season by any stretch of the imagination. He had spurts where he was good. Then he had spurts where he was not good. How would you grade Jordan Binnington this year?
I would probably give him about a C. I'd say he was average. I mean, he had games where he played really well. He had games where he played really badly. But, a lot of it had to do with the defensive units around him. They didn't play great. But I don't think we really saw maybe a couple of stretches, but we've not really seen that Bennington that we saw in the cup-winning year where he stole games for you, where he just stood on his head and he was the difference. I mean, can you really remember saying for any amount of time this year that Jordan Binnington was the reason that the Blues won games?
No. And, Scott, I've had arguments with you about Jordan Binnington. I have. And I'm going to sit here and agree with you. We did not see that Your point proved to be right. I'm hoping with a full offseason this year and a full season next year that Jordan Binnington kind of not reclaims 2019, because again, I don't think we'll ever see that again, 2019. But if he's anywhere close to that, Scott, we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
Yeah. And like I said, he was okay this year. He wasn't bad. He was a good goalie. And there were games where his defense let him down. I mean, I'm totally not putting all the blame on Jordan Binnington by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that he wasn't at the top of his game this year for the most part. I'm gonna jump back to a question that Wags posted yesterday, and I saw your comment, and I don't know if you saw my response to you, but
was that
Wags,
that was you?
Which one of those three Blues players would you be the least upset with if they left? And I saw your answer was Jaden Schwartz. Did you see my response to your comment about Jaden Schwartz being the guy that you would be okay with if the Blues left?
Yeah. And here's why I say that, though, Scott. What has Jaden Schwartz done for you since the Cup run? What is he?
I'm going to put it to you like this, Joe. And I've heard this, and then I went back and looked at it. Do you realize that when Jaden Schwartz plays for the Blues over the last 4 years, their winning percentage is like .680. When he's not in the lineup, their winning percentage is like .420. I mean, the win-loss record with Jaden Schwartz in the Blues lineup and Jaden Schwartz not in the lineup is absolutely ridiculous. So he is a huge factor for that team, even when he's not scoring. And, I mean, you can go look at the stats. I mean, it's almost unbelievable what a different team this is when he's on the ice to when he's not on the ice.
Look, Scott, I'd be upset with losing all of them. You know what I mean? I can make an argument for why I wouldn't want to lose any of those. But Jaden Schwartz is one of those guys that if you're going to lose one, because he's going to cost you a lot. And he hasn't really done much for you since in terms of scoring. Scott. Except
that I just told you that he does do something, because the team is a totally different team when his winning percentage when he's on the ice and when he's not is completely different than Tarasenko. I mean, there's not much of a difference when Vladdy Tarasenko is on the ice and when he's not in their win-loss record over the last few years. Well, Jaden Schwartz is a huge difference maker, whether it's because just his presence on the ice, whether he's a calming influence in the locker room, whatever it is. Jaden Schwartz is a huge part of that team. And, I actually heard a couple of people within the Blues organization and the media say Jaden Schwartz is the heart and soul of that Blues team.
Yeah, but get ready for that heart and soul to be taken out of the Blues then, because I don't think he signs back here unless he takes a hell of a distance. You really want Jaden Schwartz at 6.5 when you have Tarasenko locked up for that?
I honestly don't think Vladdy Tarasenko is going to be here. Honestly,
I think he is.
Apparently, he hired a new agent. And there's rumors that he's wanting to renegotiate. He's not happy. There were some rumors coming out today that he's hired a new agent because he wants to try to restructure his contract, and he's not happy with this, and he's not happy with that. I think Tarasenko is a problem. I think he's been a problem for a long time, and I don't think he's going to be here.
You think he's a cancer?
I'm not going to go that strongly, but I kind of think there's an issue there. Yeah, I think there's. How many times have we heard – let me put it to you like this, and forget about the money part of it. So when people talk about – let's just compare what you hear when people talk about these two guys. Jaden Schwartz doesn't score goals all the time, and I'll admit that. He's a very streaky goal scorer. But what do you always hear him talk about when they talk about Jaden Schwartz? They talk about how hard he is, how much he works, what a leader he is, all these intangible things that he brings to the ice. What do you hear about Vladdy? A lot. He disappears. His feet weren't moving. He didn't seem to be in on those plays. He didn't seem to be engaged. How many times have you heard those comments about Vladimir Tarasenko over the last 3 or 4 years?
A lot.
So which one of those guys would you rather have on your team? The guy that, even though he's not scoring a ton, is working his butt off and is a leader, or a guy who, when things aren't going his way, disappears and pouts?
Jaden Schwartz. I'd take Jaden Schwartz. Okay. But, Scott, if you do lose Tarasenko, you're going to need goal scoring. And granted, I was talking to a buddy about this last night. And he goes, why would you go sign a goal scorer? This isn't a run and gun offense. Every team needs a game breaker. Maybe we have that already in Jordan Kyrou. Maybe. I mean, can you really say that for sure?
No, you can't say that for sure. You hope so. But here's another question. When was the last time Vladdy was that guy? The middle of 2019?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about 2 years ago. We're not sure that he's ever going to be that guy again. So, I wouldn't pin my hopes on Vladimir Tarasenko, and it's not going to be easy to move him, but it wouldn't shock me if he's not in St. Louis next year. And I know Wags' thoughts about this, but a week or so ago I would have said I don't think there's any way. But it's interesting to me that every media person in St. Louis, whether you're talking about Curbs or Joey Vitale or JR, any of those guys, the first guy that they talk about that they think that Doug Armstrong may at least look at really closely is Jack Eichel. And I know Wags has said no, he doesn't want to make that move. The fact that all these guys keep bringing up his name, and it's going to cost you a lot. Robert Thomas is probably gone if you bring Eichel here. I mean, Thomas is probably going to be one of the biggest parts of that trade. But and it's $10 million that you're going to have to pay him. You're going to definitely have to restructure your contracts. But if you want to bring in another goal scorer and maybe shake things up, maybe that is the move that the Blues need to make.
Yeah, that is the move you need to make, but it's going to cost you a little more. They're not going to fleece Buffalo again. They are not going to. You're going to give up more.
Yeah, and like I said, it's going to cost you Robert Thomas, and it's probably going to cost you some draft picks, and it's not going to be easy. But maybe that's what this team needs. Maybe you do need to just take 3 or 4 guys and move them out and bring in new blood and not start over, but just shake things up.
Well, Scott, I was listening to the Instant Replay on 101 today, and they said basically you got to win in the next 2 years. Because look at these guys, O'Reilly. You got O'Reilly getting older. You have Braden Shen getting into his mid-30s. At that point, you're going to have Falk, Krug signed to long-term deals. You're going to need to win and win now because those guys are going to get older and those contracts aren't going to look good. So you're going to need to maximize what you got now. Do you agree with that?
You do. I mean, and that's very true. I mean, look at the guy who was your best player basically this year on offense is David Perron. David Perron's going to be 33 years old. He's not a kid anymore. And there's a guy who's, has 1 year left on his contract. And, when they asked him today about signing a long-term contract, he said, well, it's going to have to be 6 or 7 more years to sign me because that's how long he wants to play. So is David Perron a guy at 33 that you're really excited about signing for 6 or 7 more years?
Hell no. And I know what he's done this year. But at what point as a hockey player do you start to decline, though? Especially skating
there are a lot of players that are playing until they're 38, 39 years old and still relatively productive. But to the point that Ferrari and everybody was talking about today, you don't want to get into that situation where you've got, all of your key pieces basically being in their mid-30s. And that's kind of where the Blues are headed right now, because like you said, you've got O'Reilly and you've got Shin and you've got Perron and you've got Falk, but all those guys they're starting to hit their 30s, and so if you don't win, then, and they're all signed for long-term contracts. You've still got 6 years left on Shin's contract. O'Reilly's still got a bunch of time. Falk's got a bunch of time. So, you either have to make some moves and shake things up to try to win right now, or you're going to be stuck in a situation where you've got a bunch of guys in your mid-30s that you have big contracts on and you've got one championship to show for it. And, the Blues are kind of in a sticky situation right now. You've got to try to figure out exactly what direction you want to take this organization.
I could see some guys getting shipped out. I mean, Hoffman's not going to be back, of course.
No.
You're not probably going to have Gunnarsson back. You're probably, at some point you're probably losing. I say you lose Vince Dunn too. I say the one guy you can't afford to lose though is a guy in Ivan Barbashev. You can't lose him. He is an integral part to your team. He's not Jaden Schwartz. I get it. But you saw when he wasn't in the lineup in the Cup final, that team just didn't look right.
Well, and the other guy that we don't talk enough about that I think they really missed this year because we've seen what a difference he makes when he's there is Oscar Sundqvist.
Yeah.
It's very possible that you do lose one of those guys with the expansion draft. I mean, because you got to figure out who you're going to protect, and it's very possible that one of those guys is unprotected.
Yeah, Scott. Just a quick prediction before we just get into the NBA real quick. Who's going right now?
Who's do what now? Sorry,
who's going to go to Seattle? In your mind, who is that guy that you think they're going to take? I know it's tough. That's a tough answer, but
you know what? I think one of the guys. Well, I'm going to say Vince Dunn. I think Vince Dunn's going to go.
I wouldn't be upset at that. And I'll be honest with you. I wish they would take Sanford off our hands too.
He's another one of those guys that has spurts where he plays really well and then he disappears, and he's got a lot of potential. But we've had a lot of those guys. That's what a lot of people are saying about Robert Thomas. Maybe you trade him because Thomas has shown potential and he's shown flashes. And he was hurt a lot this year. But you still don't really know what you have in Robert Thomas because he's never really been able to put it all together.
Yeah, he's never been able to put it all together. I think it's time to move on from Thomas. I'll have to get Wags' thought on this. What?
I know what Wags' answer to this is because we've talked about it when you weren't on one night. We had a conversation and Wags would not move on from Robert Thomas. Thomas and Kyrou were kind of staples in Wags' mind. I know we've had this conversation.
You keep Kyrou.
Well, right, yeah, but he keeps both of them.
Yeah. So just looking at the NBA scoreboard real quick, you have the Boston Celtics losing to the Brooklyn Nets 130-108.
Celtics are done.
Yeah, the Celtics are done. It's sad. I think that team's going in for a rebuild. I really do. I think they ship Jason Tatum off this offseason. Am I nuts saying that?
I don't know that they do, but I think there's more of a possibility that it happens this year than there's ever been before. I'm not going to say they do it, but I think they'll at least look at the possibility.
So you got the Lakers and Phoenix Suns playing right now. You got a 2-point lead for the Lakers late in the second quarter, 32-30. Well, I don't know if that's the quick score because I'm looking. This doesn't update right away.
36 right now.
37-36. Thank you, Scott. And you have the Dallas Mavericks and Los Angeles Clippers. Dallas is actually beating the Clippers 24-16. Dallas is going to pull off the upset, right?
Yep, they won game one. I think, Dallas, we saw Dallas show signs last year, and, you got Doncic and you got Porzingis. And I think this is the year that Dallas, they struggled for a good part of the regular season. But I think they're going to take the Clippers down, and I think Dallas is going to be a scary team as we move forward in these Western Conference playoffs. I
think they're a sneaky finals team.
Oh, man, the West is so loaded. They could be. Utah's scary. Denver's scary. Phoenix is good. Portland's good. I mean, there's a bunch of teams. And then, I think Phoenix is going to beat the Lakers. But until they actually do it, you can't ever count out the Lakers until LeBron and AD are knocked out. But there's so many good young teams in the West. Anybody really could get to the finals, and it wouldn't surprise me.
In my mind, Scott, Damian Lillard and the Portland Trail Blazers reminded me of LeBron James in Cleveland the first time around. He's willing a bunch of guys that he doesn't have anyone like a 1-2 punch. It's only him there.
Yeah, and this may be if Portland gets knocked out early, if they don't go very far, this may be the last run for Damian Lillard in Portland. It doesn't seem possible, but this is his 9th year in the league. I mean, he's getting up there. I think if they get knocked out early, it wouldn't shock me at all if Lillard requests a trade, tries to go somewhere and have a shot to win.
Do you like that comparison, Scott, or am I nuts?
A little bit. Although Cleveland, you can say that, but LeBron had some guys, that first run. I mean, he was the superstar. But, you had Sabonis and you had Larry Hughes, and there were some pieces on that team. It wasn't just LeBron.
It wasn't just LeBron. In my eyes, he kept that team in that series, though, and he won that team. He almost willed a team to an NBA MVP. Or no, NBA Finals MVP and NBA championship. So, yeah, I think without LeBron in that team had no chance, Scott.
Well, no. I mean, LeBron was the star. But like I said, Sabonis and Larry Hughes were both all-stars. I mean, they had both been all-stars. They were both solid players. So it wasn't like LeBron and a bunch of nobodies, which some people try to pretend like it was. It wasn't. He did have some talent on that team around him. Whereas, name one of the other 4 players on the Portland Trailblazers right now.
Exactly. You can't do it. So, good show tonight, Scott. Thank you, everybody, for watching here on ASTV Productions. Come back every night at 9 p.m. for Crunch Time Nightly. Until then, I'm Joe Hamilton alongside Scott Tobin. Do the right things out there. Get your vaccination. Do what you got to do. Until tomorrow, we will see you guys then.